Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We're going to take a look at some Peter David comics today. Peter David was a guy I kind of avoided doing reviews on for a long time, largely because his comics tended to be writer's comics. You know, he didn't have a whole lot of room in his stories for interesting looking splash, but interesting looking art, really. It's all about the plot development and the dialogue. And if you get a chance to put in, something that looks kind of fun, then okay, go ahead and do that, but you're not allowed to go out of your way to do that. But I've started covering Peter David a little bit more recently on the channel, so, I figured, why don't I take a stab at the iconic Peter David Hulk run? Dude wrote like 200 goddamn issues of this character. Went through a slew of artists. If anything deserves a little bit of time, I think that qualifies. So today we're going to take a look at Incredible Hulk number 372. And before we get started, another thing that's incredible is the pending Blood Force Kickstarter. Gotta drop it in here constantly, because you never know when somebody's going to be seeing this for the first time. I'm thinking late October, I'm going to be launching the Kickstarter for Blood Force number 1. So everybody who's been bugging me about, where can I get physical copies, now's the time where you can finally do that. Hopefully we can make enough that I can get Lee Calba to finish coloring it. That would be awesome. I think that's the best way to present that comic. You'll have a chance to get yourself some original Blood Force number 1 art. Or if you're not picky about getting it on history, you'll also get a chance to get some Blood Force prints. So keep your eyes open for that. It's coming soon, and I'm only a little terrified about having to go through a campaign. All right, so let's get back to this. This is, towards the end of the Grey Hulk era of the Incredible Hulk. Bruce Banner had switched the Grey Hulk persona just before Peter David got on board. The whole deal with the Grey Hulk is that he's smarter than the Green Hulk. He's not quite as strong, but he's a shit ton meaner. And it's been an interesting run. It's an interesting time, actually, in comics where you get these kind of weird alternate versions of these kind of standard tried and true characters. This is around the time when Spider-Man has his black suit as well. Only recently over in Spider-Man, he switched back to his original red and blues, and kind of following suit, this issue is going to start the return of the big green guy. And this is the era of the Hulk that I probably enjoy the most, the Dale Keown era. Brief as it may be, I've always enjoyed Dale Keown's style, like more than just about any other, popular artists at that time. There's a cleanliness to it that I think is kind of undeniable. Like, he uses a lot of lines, sure, but it's very particular where those lines are placed. So let's start with the cover here. I think this is maybe the best of the Dale Keown Hulk covers. From his original run, anyway. I don't know if he did projects later on. I know he does variants every once in a while, and those things are like crazy looking in terms of just the amount of skill that's thrown into them. They're not always the best designs. In fact, I think they're usually a little bit kind of placid. Yeah, I don't think Dale Keown usually designs the most dynamic looking covers. This is a pretty good one, though. We get the Jade Giant, busting through the cover, tearing through Bruce and the Grey Hulk, coming right at us, and after like 40 issues or so of just seeing the Grey Hulk, this would be a little bit exciting, I imagine. Covering up a whole bunch of the title here, which is what all those guys love to do to really accentuate things. Absolutely fantastic anatomy, which is, the most important thing to Dale Keown, I think, is just making these gigantic, swollen Michelin men with pretty reasonably accurate musculature in terms of the placement of muscles. You just pump them up with some air. And we got our faces of Bruce and Joe Fixit here at the bottom. You got the classic Dale Keown spit lines. Not allowed to open your mouth without having some spit fly out. And I'm just kind of realizing that Bruce Banner looks an awful lot like Dale Keown, which makes sense. I think most people probably learn by looking, how to draw a face by looking in a mirror. I know I did. Most characters I draw still have my ears and nose. But yeah, pretty damn good cover. Nice thick outlines, too, around everything. Going really heavy with some brushstrokes. That looks great. All right, so the title of this one is He's Back. Is he back to stay? Not so much just yet. We'll get into that. So this is going to be brought to us by Peter David as the writer, Dale Keown as the penciler, Bob McLeod doing the inking, and then Joe Rosen on letters and Glynis Oliver on colors. So, that's a pretty good crowd. Bobby Chase is the editor. Yeah, no, that's a good group altogether. All right, so we're starting out with a character named Prometheus. And he's, I believe, a member of the Pantheon, which is a group that is going to start becoming more prevalent in the Hulk comic going forward. I'm not a huge fan of the Pantheon. I don't think that story felt like it was going anywhere particularly interesting, but then again, I didn't stick around to see it played out either, so there's that. And Prometheus is rocketing down a road in a speed racer car. Like that, that's what that is, right? As far as the splash goes, this is fine. All the tech looks all right. And it's good as an opening scene. Like this would work as well as an opening scene in a TV show or something, with the car just hurtling towards us with like voiceover dialogue. All right, so Prometheus is heading for Connecticut because apparently he's gotten word, word has gotten out anyway, that Bruce Banner is heading there because that's where Betty is. So Bruce is during one of his, presumed dead on the run kind of periods, which happen pretty often in the Hulk. And the Pantheon are looking to try and draw him out. And as he speeds along, we get like a train about to cross the tracks here, which he shoots in front of just at the last minute. And he's going to do a little bit of that. Not a whole lot interesting there for Dale Keown to draw. That's going to continue for a little while. All right, meanwhile, presumably in Connecticut, Bruce knocks on the door. It turns out what he's knocking on is a convent. And that's where he's heard that Betty's staying. So he's trying to get in to see her. The nun in charge just assumes that he's a reporter, because apparently this is what's been going on, is that reporters have been hounding Betty about the whereabouts of Bruce Banner, or about, just what it's like to be married to a dude who turns into a giant green monster. So, assuming that Bruce is a reporter, she's not even going to let him get a word out, and just slams the door in his face. Bruce, of course, he's been, like, hitchhiking and shit across the country. He's not going to go across states and then get to where he's going and get the door slammed in his face and go, oh well, I tried. So instead, he goes and finds the gate here, the fence, and he's going to hop over that. His shirt catches on one of the poles here, ripping it down the back. And he's got this big scar down his back from one of the last few issues. The last one we looked at was 368, which is only a few issues before this. They didn't mention the scar in that one. So maybe that happened in one of the in-between issues. The main thing that did happen in issue 368 was that some weird shit was going on with the Hulk. Because the whole deal with the Grey Hulk, when he comes out, is that he comes out at night. Every day, Bruce Banner gets to walk around in the daytime. Joe Fixit gets to take over at night. But for some reason in issue 368, even though it was during the day, Bruce got attacked by Mr. Hyde and Joe Fixit came to the rescue. And I think that's something that's going to carry on going forward. Meanwhile, somewhere else in town, got a priest who's driving towards the convent. Only before he can get there, he gets cut off by Speed Racer, and he kind of swerves and runs into a pole, knocks himself out. This is relevant to the plot. Not a whole lot of joking going on at the beginning of this comic, I should note. The closest we get is stuff where the priest is like, the sisters are going to be most upset over my tardiness. They're so punctual about taking confession. If I break the speed limit on a holy mission, is that... And then he can't finish his sentence because he gets cut off. So, we'll get a few little bits here and there, but for the most part, Peter David's going to keep it fairly serious for this one. So, Bruce sneaks into the first building he finds. Turns out this is the chapel. And, he can't be spotted, so he's going to sneak into an alcove. Turns out he's sneaking into a confessional. There's a little bit of coincidence going on here, but that's okay. Coincidence tends to be what makes stories go sometimes. And turns out he's managed to get there just in time, again, coincidentally, for Betty to get into the other booth. Betty in full, nun regalia. And in this case, she's praying for guidance because she doesn't really know what to do. She came here, in the wake of, I imagine, one of Bruce's last attacks. And this was the convent that she actually grew up in or, went to school at, something like that. So this is a place that kind of made her happy as a kid. She came back here thinking, this is where I need to divert all of my energies. This is where I'm meant to be. And, now she's been here for a while. She's been doing the teaching, but for some reason, this isn't fulfilling her the way she thought it would. And she's going to give kind of a, long history about just how rough her life has been, which, is pretty rough for a comics character. She's married to a monster man. It says here, lost her mother, got sent to boarding school. When she got back, her father was a stranger. When she grew up, she married Bruce, had a miscarriage, and feels like she's constantly losing everything in her life. And, she says here, she's constantly kind of bounced around from identity to identity, like student, Air Force brat, daughter, wife, ex-wife, mad woman. And it's like, yeah, you had a few writers. That's going to happen, I guess. And somewhere in the middle of all this, she lost who Betty Banner is. And then when she lost the baby, the nuns were helping out and, she was kind of struck by how kind they all were. And she went, you know what, maybe that's the thing I need to go into. Somewhere far away from all this crazy monster shit that's been going on in my life for, the last 30 years or whatever it is at this point. And, she's found peace. She's found a place away from all the craziness of the world. She's found somewhere where Bruce is not. That's kind of what it boils down to. And Bruce has a little breakdown on his side of the booth there. And he just kind of, chokes out that he's happy for her because he's acting as the priest. And she's, well, that wasn't actually my confession. She's going to continue. Only, at that point, one of the other sisters comes in and says how some man was spotted sneaking onto the grounds. They called the police, but they're going to take some time to get here. Most of them are stuck pursuing some insane driver who got Father Lowry into an accident. That he's like, I was just confessing to Father Lowry, wasn't I? She looks back. The confessional booth is wide open. So Bruce has done a runner. And yeah, so Bruce ends up at the side of, I guess, a lake or something, and he's just kind of, feeling sorry for himself. And he's sure now that Betty hates him. This is the girl he loves more than anything. And all he's really done is brought a shit ton of chaos and misery into her life. So he's trying to kind of wrestle with this and, maybe I should just leave her alone, let her live her life. And he's like, well, she is married to me. A nun can't be married. That's not right. And it's like, well, then again, on the other hand, I'm presumed dead. So we're probably not married and she's at peace. So, again, just kind of going back and forth. Again, not a whole lot of fun stuff for Dale Keown to draw on these pages. They do look super clean, though. Like, the faces look great. The expressions are good. There's a hint of, John Byrne sometimes when Dale Keown's drawing faces. I feel like, maybe that's just something I'm getting. But, it's always just, super clean-looking stuff. I will say I don't think any of the other, guys who would eventually go on to Image really match this level of slickness. Silvestri, I think, can still probably outdraw Keown, but, there's also a messiness to Silvestri's style. Portasio, too. Portasio draws great, but his stuff gets just out of control sometimes. And Jim Lee, is very finished, very polished, but with all of the extra hatching and rendering getting thrown onto every figure, the whole clean line thing isn't quite as there as on this. There's some drawbacks to that, too. I think it's fair to say that Dale Keown isn't as imaginative as some of those guys, maybe in part because of that. Guys like Silvestri and Portasio, they can draw anything, and they can draw it all exciting, and they can draw it from interesting angles, and they'll come up with interesting ways to present everything. Dale Keown, I think, is more in the Jim Lee camp, where he's got a very set way that he draws everything, and he can't always break outside of those bonds. And he gets so focused on drawing the figures so exactly, spending so much time on those, and just locking them down, making them look awesome, making them look as finished as possible. He doesn't necessarily think of the most interesting way to present those figures, which sometimes requires bending or stretching them in a way that isn't realistic. I think that's maybe the main takeaway, is that the Dale Keown stuff is very, very grounded in realism, other than the proportions of his monster characters. Okay, so now we're getting back to the convent, and we've got the Mother Superior here at our office, and Betty walks in. Betty's no longer in her nun regalia. And she's going to be finishing her confession that she started in the booth with Bruce, that Bruce kind of ran away from before she could get to the maybe more interesting part to him. And she tells the Mother Superior how, she keeps hearing all these reports about Bruce, about how he's being cited here, about how he's popped up over here. And she doesn't really give it any kind of credence, because, those things just keep popping up. Maybe they're true, maybe they're not, and she can't have any kind of effect on it one way or the other. But what is true is that, every time she hears one of these, she hopes that Bruce is going to be okay and that he's going to find his way back to her. She maybe doesn't even want to feel that way, but that's the way it is. And she can't really devote herself fully to the convent because of this, because really Bruce is her priority. And the Mother Superior, who was teaching at the boarding school when Betty was a student there, she's like, oh yeah, I remember when you were a kid, and you had a whole lot of determination going on at that time, and I thought that was pretty great. And, when you came here, I didn't see it anymore. So we gave you the chance to explore, working at the convent here, and maybe find out if that would provide the answers you were looking for. And, Betty's kind of like, well, it didn't. And, Mother's like, well, no, but what it did do was it confirmed that this isn't the place you need to be right now. So that's a good thing for you to know. We know Peter David. We know Peter David likes to get into the psychology of his characters and their motivations and everything. So everything has to be talked out at length, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think if everybody's doing it, it gets a little old. But, when it's just guys like Peter David or, somebody similar to that, and, that's their particular method, I think that works out great. All right, so we're done with that scene. Back to Speed Racer rocketing through town. flipping over cars in his wake. And then back to Bruce. We just get the one panel there. That's all we need to just kind of keep him present around the corners of our mind there. Back to Bruce here, who's walking back out of the woods, and he's kind of made a decision that, he's got to stay out of Betty's life. And then when he makes that decision, he gets out to the road, and coincidentally, again, across the road, he sees Betty, and she's not wearing her nun gear. And he's like, wait, what? What's going on? And, before he can really figure it out, Betty gets into a cab, and she takes off. So Bruce is going to call into the convent and ask, is Betty Banner there? And, the nun that he gets, again, figures that he's probably a reporter. He's like, no, wait, I'm a cab dispatcher. One of the guys picked her up, and we've got no record of destination. We need it for another pickup. And that's enough for the nun to tell him, oh, well, I think she was heading for the Amtrak station, but don't you guys all have radios? And that's when Bruce hangs up. All right, so runs out into the middle of the road, stops the first car he sees, asks where the Amtrak station is, and, gets some directions. Also gets the guy going, dude, are you fucking crazy? You don't run out into the road like that. That's not cool. And he's like, can you drive me to the Amtrak station? She's like, no, I can't drive you to the goddamn Amtrak station. So Bruce yanks him out of the car, steals the car, and takes off. Interestingly, not the best looking car. Some of the details look about right. This is also 1991. This might actually be okay proportions. Hard to say. Stuff like this looks about right. It's just when you get to the side view, it's like, that thing looks like all crunched up. It's like, well, but then again, 1991. Yeah, cars maybe did look a bit like that. So, anyway, Bruce gets in the car, takes off. Bruce has been acting a bit more erratically lately. A lot of the time he's pretty careful. That's been kind of going out the window recently. And he's completely focused on Betty, doesn't notice Speed Racer coming up in his rearview window. So we're getting to the action now. All right, so Bruce is chasing her down in his stolen car. He's very single-minded about it. He's not even realizing that there's a fucking future car screaming up behind him. Sees a sign for the Amtrak station. He's like, okay, this is everything. This is all that matters. And then the future car runs him off the road right into a sign here. Quick cut to Betty at the station. Doesn't hear anything that's going on outside. But the guy behind the till tells her, hey, we got a train leaving in 5 minutes, so you're just in time. So we're adding a ticking clock element on this. Bruce gets out of the car, doesn't even check to see who ran him off the road. Doesn't matter. He's spent years being persecuted, so he gets a little bit, just kind of get the blinders on, go for your objective. So he takes off. He's just yelling at the train station. She's on the platform, he can see her, but she can't hear him because this friggin' car keeps revving up its engine. Cuts him off. Shoots James Bond oil slick stuff at his feet so that he can't take off on him. And Bruce is finally who the hell is that? And then future car shoots out I don't know, like a plastic net at him. And Prometheus here in the driver's seat says, okay, I've got him. It's the middle of the day, so we don't have to worry about the Hulk coming out. So there's no danger of him escaping now. Having to draw a whole bunch of tiny panels, which works really well for the pace of the comic, which, is probably the most important thing that Peter David's keeping in mind right now. Again, not the most fun stuff to draw. The most important thing when you got this many tiny panels is clarity, which Dale Keown gets across. Bonk. So Bruce is going absolutely nuts because this is his one chance to catch Betty, and then she's gone for who knows where. Starts Mr. Fantastic stretching, so Dale's getting a little bit expressionistic here, so that's interesting. And manages to break out of the bag that he's stuck in. Prometheus slams on the brakes and, informs back to the Mount, which is his headquarters, saying, he broke out, I don't like where this is going. And he looks really fucking pissed, this could get bad. And Bruce just starts yelling at Prometheus, going, I'm sick of being kicked and shoved around and treated like dirt. I've had it. I want Betty, and you won't stop me. Get out of my way. And he's just getting more and more worked up. And then, something starts happening, and that scar on his back, whatever that was, starts bubbling up. And Bruce is scared for a second, but then, he's just no, I don't care. It won't keep me from Betty. She's mine. He just starts yelling mine, mine, mine over and over, which still isn't healthy exactly. But, Bruce has never been the most stable dude. And then that scar on his back splits. And, all his skin starts tearing off. I'm not sure how often this has been the transformation. I don't think very at this point. This is almost like Immortal Hulk type stuff. And, the big green muscles start bulging through. We're going to start to get some pretty cool looking drawings. And then we get our full page splash of the original Green Hulk. Back after 4 or 5 years, whatever it's been. Not necessarily the coolest looking shot, you know, the overhead angle and everything. Like, actually, I think you would probably want a lower angle to make him, you know, like a bit more impressive. But I also get the feeling this is referencing something directly. I feel like I've seen this shot before out of, I don't know, like the John Byrne era or something. I just can't quite place it. But, you know, it's a great looking splash in terms of, like, you know, execution and the kind of thing that Marvel can use for promotion for, like, ever. So yeah, it turns to snarl at the car. And we get a pretty nice close-up. You know, this is about as big as Peter David's going to allow Dale Keown to get, I think. Prometheus radios back to the Mount, says, we got a bit of a problem. I'm switching to full offense. Starts shooting fire at the Hulk, starts shooting him with Kirby Crackle, which manages to knock the Hulk off his feet. You know, we're starting to get some fun stuff going on. And as he pulls up on the Hulk, Hulk digs out a hole and tears up a bunch of the road that the car is, you know, coming up on. That looks like a little Matchbox car. And manages to knock him back. And he's not talking like friendly Green Hulk or, you know, leave me alone Green Hulk. He's talking like, I'm going to make you bleed Green Hulk. So, like, Bruce just kind of degenerating into pure mindless rage here. Achilles shoots out some gas, because of course he's got gas, just so he can blind the Hulk. Prometheus shoots out some, like, cables that all fasten onto the Hulk and then sends an electrical charge through. He's got every single trick in his future car. And he starts dragging him away, but Hulk sinks his fingers into the road, which snaps the cables. Prometheus shoots him then with a freeze gun. You gotta wonder just how many tricks he's got in this thing. I guess as many as Peter David can think of. And yeah, starts freezing the Hulk solid. You get a little close-up of the different Banner voices. With Bruce saying how, you know, he can't lose consciousness or he'll revert back to Bruce. And that won't help anything. Grey Hulk, of course, is just like, man, both of you guys are fucking morons. I'd have been out of this, like, long ago. And, you know, Hulk breaks free. And he starts, you know, charging down the car here. Car just rams him and manages to get on top of him here. But yeah, no, we're getting all sorts of great looking stuff now. Like, this is the stuff Dale Keown, I think, has wanted to draw forever. You know, if you ever saw any of the clips of Dale Keown with his late night podcast where he was doing a little bit of ranting, he was talking about how when he was growing up, like, not only was the Hulk his favorite character, he considered the Hulk like his best friend. Like, legit, that's a quote. So you imagine that all Dale Keown really wanted to do was to get work at Marvel and draw the Hulk. And he gets the Hulk and he gets the Grey Hulk to start with. And it's like, okay, well, this is pretty close at least. And then Peter David goes, okay, fine, here you go. And yeah, Dale's going to just draw this how I imagine he's always wanted to draw it. Like, you know, like he can't quite do just the big ass splash pages and glory shots of the Hulk, but he's going to take every opportunity to make the Hulk look as cool as he can. And Hulk manages to get his feet under him, lifts up the car. Again, that's from the side, it's not a great looking car. And just leaps up into the air with it. Get a quick shot of Betty boarding the train. Again, there's that ticking clock thing. And Hulk tosses down the car, intending to smash it on the ground. But since this is a future car, he's just going to initiate the afterburners and take off back for the Mount. He's radioing back, being like, that freeze would have taken out the Grey Hulk, but I am in serious trouble here. I'm going to double back, and we're going to get some reinforcements going on. So Bruce kind of resetting the parameters, unknowingly anyway. So Hulk manages to land back down, and with no immediate threat anymore, he starts to revert back to Bruce. And Bruce is just like, what the hell was that? So, like, he was aware that the Hulk was, you know, like, it was the Green Hulk who was in charge this time. But he doesn't have much time to think about it because the train is pulled up. Betty's boarding, as far as he knows. And he starts chasing after them. And he's screaming, you know, like, wait, come back. But, of course, he can't catch up. And it just takes off without him. And he collapses on the tracks. And, you know, for a second, he's, like, wishing that the Green Hulk would take over again. So that at least he'd have, like, the strength to catch up with it. And then he realizes that's kind of a crazy way to think. You actually want the Hulk back in your life? And he just kind of succumbs to despair for a second. He's like, oh my God, I'm not allowed to have anything good in my life. And then looks up, and there's Betty. She either didn't board the train or hopped off or something. But I guess she saw him there. And they go running into their arms, and they get a big reunion smooch. And it's very nice. We actually finally, like, Bruce finally got, like, a nice moment. How often does that happen in the Hulk? Dale Keown's going to pop them out of the panel border and everything, make sure it's the most important thing on the page. It's the only thing you're really paying attention to. It's a great little moment. And that's where this issue's going to end. All right, so that is it for Incredible Hulk number 372. So yeah, I'll do a couple more of these. We're not going to do a full like issue by issue, just follow the Hulk forever now, but we're going to do a couple of the key issues, I think. Like, for instance, in the next couple of issues, there's like an attack by the Super Skrull. I don't really think we need to cover that too much, although I'm sure there will be some development, now that Bruce and Betty are back together. That has to be kind of established. But we'll at least do number 376 and number 377. Those are the big ones, I think. So those will be fun to get to. I've always kind of wanted to get back to the Dale Keown Hulk. Dale Keown just plain draws the best version of the Hulk. That's all there is to it. I like plenty of other people's versions of the Hulk. I like Sam Keith's version of the Hulk. I like Jeff Purves' version, to be honest. It doesn't have the same kind of finish, but like he just like looks like a giant troll, which I think kind of works. To be honest, I like both those Hulks better than the Todd McFarlane version, but I'm just not a huge Todd mark. But yeah, more Keown Hulk I think is just always kind of a good thing. So we'll have that to look forward to in future, but for this one, that's going to do it. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Helps with all the algorithm stuff. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. And if you really want to help out, in the description, there's a link to my Patreon. And if you go subscribe there, that gives you access to everything I do. So all sorts of videos, everything to do with the Blood Force comics, including the Blood Force comics, and every single page as I complete them. Also in the description, there's a link to the merch store. That's where you get your Blood Force merch. I know you were wondering. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions, because commissions are open. So yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.